Welcome back to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter, John Steppe, and I am excited to welcome back my friend, Tom Kakert of HawkeyeReport.com. Tom, thanks for joining me.
John, it's always good to be on with you and all the folks who are with the Gazette. Love you guys. So great to be on.
Thank you. Well, timed this pretty well with, we're recording this a couple hours after a little bit of recruiting news with Derek Wiscoff committing to the Hawkeyes from Williamsburg. Really athletic guy. So let's start off with that. That's another good get for the 2024 class.
Yeah, it is. And Iowa's doing really well in the 2024 class, and we can talk about that in a minute. But Derek's from Williamsburg. That's kind of Hawkeye country there. You think about like Austin Blythe, somebody like that, all from that area. 6'3", 205-pound linebacker. Is going to Drake Relays next week with a 6'9" high jump, which is pretty freaking good,
Considering he's 6'3" in height, to be able to jump 6'9".
6'9" that's pretty bouncy. He's a good athlete too. As a sophomore at Williamsburg, had 80 tackles, 3 interceptions on defense, 23 catches for 372 yards and 5 touchdowns on offense. Also, real good basketball player, plays for the Martin Brothers AAU team, and is averaged for his high school team 15.3 points, 6.6 rebounds, and as we mentioned, currently number 1 in the state with a 6'9" high jump. So, he's a man for all seasons. So good get. He had already piled up offers from Iowa State, Wisconsin, and Nebraska too. So
probably Iowa's 3 biggest rivals.
Yes, yeah. Unless Minnesota, you could throw Minnesota in there too, but in that conversation. But that's a great. So you're not just getting a kid who just Iowa threw an offer to. Everybody else wanted him, and they thought they had a shot at him. So now Iowa has their 3rd commitment in the 2024 class, and all 3 are in-state kids. Cody Fox, offensive lineman; Cam Buffington, also linebacker. So they're doing well out of the gate in that class.
Because those are the top 3 recruits in the state of Iowa, right?
Yeah, I would think they're going to end up being the top 3 players in state this year.
And, that's not too bad considering that you have a lot of schools that seem to be coming into Iowa to recruit. Granted, when you have a kid like Xavier Wampa in the 2022 class, that doesn't happen every year. And then Caden Proctor in 2023. This isn't, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think either of any of these 3 players are coming in with the hype of Wampa or Proctor by a wide margin. But
I wouldn't say that. Cody Fox is a 4-star kid initially for Rivals, and by the way, now with that 3 commits, Iowa is number 4 in the country in the class of 2024 right now. So it's a little early, obviously, but
don't hang up the recruiting banner too early.
Do not run that banner yet. But even in the 2023 class, they picked up recently John Nestor commitment. So they're up to 7 for the 2023 class. And Rivals has that team ranking of 15 now. That's going to fluctuate a little bit, but they're off to a really solid start. I think the next couple months obviously are going to be huge for the 2023 class.
And the interesting thing too is I think if I was counting right, it's 5 different states that those 7 prospects have come from.
Yeah, you got Iowa, New Jersey, Colorado, Indiana, and Illinois. So they've spread out. Lanez, they've got their quarterback who's from Princeton, New Jersey, works with Tony Rasiopi.
Same guy Petrus works with.
Same guy that Petrus, Nate Stanley works with him too. So they've got him. They've got their offensive lineman with Leighton Jones. at the safety prospect and Nestor. They've got the defensive end and Brackney. Ben Keeter's maybe the best player. I think he's the best next to Proctor. He's probably the second best player, I think, in the state of Iowa for the 2023 class.
And in probably most years would be number one if it wasn't for a guy like Proctor.
Yeah, and Keeter's going to try and pull off the rare double. We're seeing Brody Breck try to pull off the football baseball. Keeter's going to try and pull off the wrestling football double, which will be something if he can do that.
Credit to him if he can pull that one off. That, baseball and football, it's hard enough for Brecht, and those seasons don't have much overlap aside from obviously the spring, practice season.
Yeah.
But, it's exhibitions for one team when the other team is in full games. Yeah, wrestling is going to have a little bit more overlap there.
Yeah, it's going to be, a challenge. One thing you won't have to worry about though is probably weight control, because he'll be wrestling heavyweight, I would imagine, at Iowa, so he's not going to have to get under 197 or something. So that'll be good for him. So I suspect he's going to do real well. He's an animal. I mean, he's really good. If you get to see him on film, he jumped off the screen. So,
and that's another example of keeping, not to borrow a certain coach from another school's kind of phrase here, but kind of building the fence around Iowa a little bit. Keeping people close to Iowa City in Iowa City.
It's where it all starts, really. And this 2023 class is going to be interesting. We were talking about this before we started recording, but because there are some battles that are going to take place somewhat between Iowa and Iowa State, but Iowa and other schools too. But with Kai Black from Urbandale, I think he's down to Iowa State. Proctor, we'll talk about him. He's kind of the special, different case. But you can go down our list here. Cooper Ebel, who Iowa just offered this past weekend, from Hartley, Iowa. Asa Newsome, linebacker from Waverly. He might not be Iowa State more. His brother's at Nebraska, so we got that involved in there. Jamison Patton's a really good one out of Des Moines. It's probably Iowa State for him. So there's going to be some good Iowa State battles here in recruiting for this cycle, and we haven't really had a ton of those in the past few years. Now Proctor is going to be just a different animal. I mean,
that's the all of the above recruiting battle.
That's the one where you wonder. Rivals has him 12th nationally, number one at his position. So, and I have full disclosure, I have him listed as my fearless forecast for Iowa, and I put that in December. For the 5-star offensive tackle, teammate of Xavier Wampa, who's already at Iowa. But, right now, these collectives and the NIL stuff, you can bet that Oregon and Ohio State and Bama and places like that are all going to be kind of gunning to get him on campus and get him an NIL deal. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Caden. I still think Iowa's in good position, but boy, it's going to be a dogfight though.
And it sounds like Iowa donors are in the process of forming a collective, is what we've been hearing so far. So we'll see how quickly that can come together, and can that match the might that Oregon has, for example, with all that Nike money.
Well, here's the thing that I come back to with it, and we were talking about this on our podcast the other day, is that I think advantage going in right now to the schools who have maybe been playing a little fast and loose with some things in recruiting over the years, if you know what I mean. because they have kind of an infrastructure that's set up. They're kind of comfortable with this. I put up a poll on our website if people would contribute to it, and it's just kind of foreign for Iowa fans because they're just not. They don't play in that sandbox. They're not part of that culture, so it's foreign for Iowa fans to have to deal with maybe. Well, we're essentially paying players. It's what we're doing.
Yeah.
If you would have done the same things 2 years ago that they're doing now, the NCAA would have been camped out in College Station and Tuscaloosa and Athens and all the other places where they've got all these collectives. And everybody's
very slowly based on the rate that the FBI investigation.
Yeah, of course it's slowly, but they would still, the alarm bells would be going off all over the country. Now it's legal. It's fair game. So, you saw, and football and recruiting and all this stuff is a copycat business. It just is. So, at once upon a time, it was an arms race to get bigger facilities, and we're in the Iowa complex all the time during football season, and you've seen how that has kind of changed over the years, and what an important part of recruiting that is. Now that arms race is over. It's nobody's going to care about those things. The question these kids have is, what's your NIL? Does your school have a collective? And I was not going to be able to compete with Texas A&M. It's got $8 to $10 million, or LSU is going to have a huge thing, or Bama, or whoever. They're not going to be able to compete with that. But what they're going to have to do is just be selective. And but you want to get a Caden Proctor, you're going to have to get him a decent NIL deal, because if you don't, somebody else will, and that might be a deciding factor for a kid like that. Not saying that he's motivated by that. I don't know. I don't think he is, but
if you put enough zeros at the end of that number, I think almost anybody would at least give some good consideration to it.
John, for all your pro wrestling fans out there, if you watch Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, he would always say, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. So, there's always a check that can be written that can get you. So there's my Ted DiBiase for the day.
Well, can check that off the Hawk Off the Press bingo card.
Yes.
So, I should start making those, I think, ahead of the episodes.
Yeah, there we go.
But, it's interesting because Iowa, with its performance in more recent years, you would think under traditional recruiting should be in those conversations with recruits. And I think Tyler Casper is a great example of somebody that very high up there in terms of very highly touted recruit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you're going up against the powers that be at, say, Oregon, where he committed, or even Tennessee, that seemed to really have a good shot there.
Tennessee's got a quarterback commit that's got a deal that could net him $8 million over his playing career.
That goes a long ways.
Yeah, I mean, that you're seeing what's out there, and not that the Caspers need money or anything, but it's part of your value as an athlete, and the genie is not going back into the bottle. It's just not. It's going to be like this moving forward. It's going to evolve and it's going to change. And Iowa is in the process. I talked to some people, and they're in the process of getting this thing up and running. They're trying to hire somebody to be a director. I think they've got a good couple candidates and identified for that, and then they want to raise a couple $1 million maybe, and start with football and basketball, men's, women's, hopefully wrestling too. We'll see, but I think there's a market for it, and I think Iowa fans are just going to have to get comfortable with, if you want success in recruiting, you're going to have to start ponying up with the collective.
Yeah, it's, as you said, the genie's not going back in the bottle here.
Tube is out of the toothpaste is out of the tube.
Yeah. And I think, if anything, it's been a little slower in the Big Ten as opposed to, say, the SEC or, the couple other, the big schools and some of the other conferences that have a lot of football money, like, say, in Oregon. So I think that certainly has, it's a little slower here than it is in other places, but regardless, it's still coming.
It's still coming.
You look at how many other Big Ten schools already have collectives.
Yeah, and they're all trying to tie them. I mean, I think when we talked to Kirk about it, and he was basically, ideally, and Nick Saban's talked about this. Ideally, just give all the kids a certain amount of money, and like that's just not how it works. There are some recruits that are more important than others. There just are.
Some who are more marketable.
Some who have
a quarterback
in the door. Yeah, the quarterback is going to command more money than the third string linebacker. Just is.
I would have used the example of the offensive lineman, but that's not really the case at Iowa.
No, there's that not this year, at least with the 2023 with Proctor.
Yeah.
In that case, he's somebody who's going to have to get a bigger check. And, there are other, I think what's happened was, I think most people thought that it would be just kind of like what we've seen to this point, which is, some of the businesses wanting to partner with athletes seeking out businesses like Caitlin Clark with Hy-Vee, as an example. And I think that was probably one of the great ideas coming out initially, but you knew that these boosters were not going to sit idly by.
No.
And they've just decided they can get more bang for the buck by pooling their money. I saw a story about Indiana, and obviously a basketball school, but that they expect to have like over $1 million in their collective, and it's primarily focused on basketball. And they were going to, Trace Jackson Davis, who's an all Big Ten player, and Race Thompson, who's coming back for an extra year, his COVID year, are both going to get NIL deals in the six figures. So, that's just how it's going to be.
And, the one kind of, there are probably some people listening to this who are a little bummed about this because Iowa is not in the best position. But, if there is a perk of this, is, for at least for Iowa fans, is for women's basketball, you would think that this maybe gives a little bit more incentive for someone like Caitlin Clark to stick around, because you look at the money that an NIL collective, once that's set up, can bring, the value, even just the standard NIL deals that people are used to, whether that's Hy-Vee, whether that's her t-shirts that I seem to see like everywhere, like that brings in a lot of money there. And you look at what, an NBA or WNBA rookie contract is, the NIL numbers sound pretty good.
Well, look at like today, Oscar Tshiebwe, the National Player of the Year in college basketball at Kentucky, announced that he was coming back. And I think it was Jeff Goodman or somebody, one of the national college basketball reporters, said that they expect Tshiebwe to have an NIL deal. And he's not from the United States, so he has to do his deal a little differently. But they're expecting that he's going to have an NIL deal that's over $2 million for next year. I know Kofi Coburn from Illinois announced he was going to go in the draft, but I talked to some Illinois people, and they thought that he had an offer on the table from Illinois of $1 million to come back, somewhere around $1 million. Yeah. So
a lot of zeros there.
Yeah. I would stay in college for $1 million.
Yeah.
Say,
maybe I need to get to be friends with Kofi. I think that could be the solution for my financial future.
Yeah, it'd be a nice check. But it's it's a new day and it's a different time, and this is how it's going to be from here on out, folks. So just kind of get used to it. You're going to see a lot of branding from player, and that even those NIL deals with the collectives don't eliminate the idea that they can go out. Student athletes can go out and do their own hustle too. They can, like the McCaffreys had their podcast with you guys for a while, and now they're doing it with the taco place.
Don't remind me of that part.
Yeah, they're going to the taco place now, but
they pick tacos over a newspaper. Come on.
Well, hey, Taco Tuesday.
It's a tough world.
Yeah.
But yeah, that, if you don't have that exclusivity, you can bring in a good chunk of dollars there. And you've got the Raygun shirts. Yeah. That I think is probably especially appealing for maybe some of the in-state players who grew up enjoying Raygun shirts, and then they get to have their own. And I know the way that Raygun does it is just a percentage of sales. Yep. So, if you sell more shirts, you make more money. Yeah. So, it's an appealing world. And obviously there are smaller things too that are coming, like the academic reward payments. Yeah. But that's kind of a drop in the bucket compared.
That's a couple $1,000. That's good money. It is. Mm-hmm. It's good money.
Oh, yeah.
They'll put a nice payment on a car if you want to get a vehicle or something, and it's more than pizza money. Yeah. But I think even like you go out to Shields now, and the Murray shirts are all over the place out there. And
that's another great example.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Keegan and Chris made some bank off of that, and now Keegan will make a lot more bank with his pro contract, but Chris will come back more than likely, and he's going to be able to, capitalize on his name, image, likeness, and he's, going to be a guy who's probably, all Big Ten-ish kind of player coming back preseason. So a lot of attention.
And there's value too, I think, with some of the players that stay home with that, where like Clark, for example, being from the state of Iowa, from the Des Moines area, that adds to that brand appeal. Chris Murray being from Cedar Rapids, there's some brand appeal there too for the hometown 100%. Person. Yeah. And I'm sure Wampa will have the same thing.
Yep. Yeah. So, I saw he already did a card show.
Yes. I think it was him, Riley Moss, I think was there. And I want to say maybe a couple others. So they had a pretty good showing there of Hawkeyes at that one. Yeah. But looking ahead now to Saturday, probably going to be another big recruiting day. Any particular names that kind of you have circled as to key priority visitors this weekend for the open practice?
Not really. I think they're just trying to get as many people in as they can this spring. I think the next big signpost in the road kind of moment for Iowa for recruiting is probably the late June, when they have their big official visit weekend. That's when you bring in Caden Proctor for his official, and you try to get everybody in and get guys committed. And I think that's the next really big kind of signpost, because the spring visits, it's just sort of like, we're getting you in here and spending some time with you. Just try to get as many people in and out of the building as you can. But that one is, you're zeroing in your focus, and those are your top targets that you're going to get in that weekend in late June.
It seems like who isn't visiting during that late weekend in June might be the better question than who is at this point.
Yeah, that's going to be, the priority for right now. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting time to see who they can narrow down their list and get those guys lined up for visits and get things secured, and then maybe kind of wrap up a good portion of the class. That's kind of what they've been doing, is most of their shopping's been done before they start fall camp in the last couple of years. So we'll see if that trend continues.
Yeah, and this past year, it seemed to be that kind of December last second wave, but obviously the more you can get done earlier, the more advantageous that is for looking ahead. And obviously 2024 is off to a good start.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the other thing you'll be doing that. So the other thing that'll be coming up in June is also camps, and you'll see some offers come based off of camps for maybe a few for 2023, 2024. Maybe they start even throwing some out for 2025 if things get wild. That's
you never know.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be. They probably have some out, and I'm just like blanking out on it, but I'm sure there's some 2025s out there. It's just it's gotten younger and younger, and kids are committing earlier and earlier. I can remember, and it doesn't seem like all that long ago, but it probably is, where there were years where they didn't have any commitments at this point in the process.
And now they have 7 for 23 and 3 for 24.
Yeah, I remember the one year, and this was, I think, maybe Seth Wallace's second year as kind of filling that recruiting coordinator role before he moved into just being position coach. And I remember they had I think it was a June, where they had like 13 commits. It felt like every day they were getting a commitment. So yeah, you can get on. There is, if you talk to Tyler Barnes, he'll tell you there is such thing as momentum in recruiting.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't. So,
well, good players tend to recruit good players too to a place.
Yeah.
So that's another key thing there. So switching gears then a little bit to spring football, we have the open practice on Saturday. Fans' first chance to see this team, at all really, since the Citrus Bowl. Our kind of second chance after getting a little bit of a sneak peek earlier in the spring with about 30 minutes that were partially taken up by special teams drills.
Yes.
So,
and stretching.
Yes. The all important stretching.
10 minutes of stretching and 15 minutes of special teams work.
Yes. The important things.
And no lining up in any sort of offensive formations.
No. So, we could see who is first team on punt unit, but that was, and spoiler, Tory Taylor was first team punter. I know that's shocking to everyone tuning in. Yes. So our first real good evaluation point here in the spring, it'll be interesting to me. I think the two positions I'm going to be keeping the closest eye on is going to be quarterback and offensive line.
Same. I think that's the two biggest storylines. Because we've heard, we've all caught on to it, starting with Seth Wallace saying something about the offense being, presenting a different look or something like that. I can't remember exactly the wording of it, but it caught my ear right away. And then Tory Taylor's comments about the offense being in the end zone a lot, and guys talking about it being simplified and different. And so I'm curious. Okay.
Will it be different? Will it be exactly the same?
The other thing is you can't really make any judgment on it until September, until they play an actual game. I mean, it can look great in spring or the open practice in the fall, but what are we talking about here? It's still practice, so we won't know for sure, but it would at least give people some hope. And I think that's kind of, but they'll still be skeptical, and that's fair to be skeptical too.
Oh yeah.
But I'm
crazy not to be at least a little skeptical of the offense, considering what happened last year.
Yeah, it was a struggle last year, and even the most ardent Iowa fan will tell you that it was a struggle. It was not pretty a lot of the time. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm offensive line, quarterbacks. Beyond that, watch the defensive line a little bit. I want to see some of those guys and see how they're doing and how they're
especially developing. Maybe Van Ness on the outside. That's a thing there where it's like, okay, that could be a really good fit if that works out well.
Yeah. And that's kind of where he was going to come in and play. And then they just kind of slid him down to tackle. But boy, I think he's their next star on that defensive line. So I'm interested to see them. And I want to see Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce, see what they're doing.
Arlen says that Keegan is even faster this year. So we'll see.
Yeah,
which is saying a lot.
What is it? His yoga regimen now or something? He's doing yoga.
Yeah.
And all this other stuff, Pilates or whatever. I don't know.
After his abdominal injury that kept him out of the Citrus Bowl, that sounded very unpleasant.
Yeah, it didn't sound like much fun, did it?
No, I was thinking, oh man, glad I don't have to go through that. I don't have any writing injuries like that.
And you haven't got carpal tunnel yet from words or anything?
No.
That's coming.
I do my finger stretching well.
The other thing to watch, I think, kind of a under the radar thing, is the place kicking.
Oh yeah.
Kicker with 3 guys competing, including a true freshman who joined in Drew Stevens, and we'll see if he's a confident kid. He believes he's going to come in and take the job. So we'll see. This will be a chance to really look at those guys. And the added bonus is it's probably going to be windy.
Yes, even better. The one benefit of this spring weather that I look outside and I'm thinking, why can't the sun come out eventually? That's the one benefit is, get to throw a little bit of a curveball in the kicking competition. And I think we've all seen Drew Stevens kicks on Twitter that have looked very, very good. Yeah. Obviously, though, that's a selective bunch that we get to see there. So it'll be interesting to see kind of in the full flesh of things how the kicking looks, because obviously Aaron Blom is somebody who came in really highly regarded. Lucas Amaya, also a really well-regarded guy when you look at like the Coles kicking camp rankings.
Yep.
So Amaya did not grow up far from where I grew up. Your random, not very relevant fun fact of the day.
And Iowa has just had, I brought this up the other day to somebody, that Iowa has just had this tremendous run of really good kickers.
Yeah.
Even with, the recent times with, Keith Duncan and Racinos and
Shudak this past year.
Yeah, even Shudak, going back to Marshall Kane and Mike Meyer. And I can't remember the last time they had a bad kicking year, or a year where you're like, oh boy, I don't know how they're going to kick a field goal this year. They've just had guys that have been really solid and consistent.
Well, the fact that you have a guy like Shudak who isn't kicking field goals until his 6th year on campus, that alone tells you a lot.
Yeah, and he may have a place in the NFL. I mean, every Tuesday when we've been out there have been NFL scouts watching him kick. So,
that's usually a good sign.
That's usually a good sign that he's gonna be in somebody's camp for sure. And they're going to have to find, Shudak also handled the kickoffs, so they'll have to find somebody for that, and that's a key spot, and
often an overlooked spot too. I think Shudak made that look easy the last 2 years, but it's not so easy.
And there's an art form to it. I mean, I remember talking to Miguel Racinos about that, just how they would talk to him about, hey, we want you to bomb it up way high and drop it inside the 10. Or we wanted you to just plow it through the end zone. It's those rules have changed a little bit now with fair catches and all that stuff. So it's a little different, but it's still, there's an art to it. And it's good when you have an experienced guy there. And heck, where else would you have, like, we had a long discussion last week with LeVar Woods about the holder.
Yes. My favorite position. I knew that we had to bring up the holder.
We had to bring up the holder, and everybody getting excited when he says Cooper DeJean has been in the mix for a holder, and the everybody got excited because Cooper's like a cult hero for Iowa fans. Haven't figured that out. Just write anything about Cooper, and the traffic goes way up, and it's going to be the same way with Xavier Wampa, I think, once we get to talk to him. But
And Cooper, I think, is especially an interesting story because Iowa recruited him, and he didn't exactly have the most competition from other schools on the recruiting trail, and he's already
it's dinky school that his story is wild. I remember talking to Tyler Barnes about his story and just how he found him. One of his neighbors' friends kind of recommended him and said, you should check this kid out. And then they kind of saw him and they're like, yeah, okay, he's pretty good. And he just did everything for his high school team. I mean, his win of a state title last year was legendary, or 2 years ago it was legendary.
A true athlete in every sense of the word.
Great basketball player too, and did track and football. He's going to be a good one.
Yeah. Now the issue with him at holder is it's going to be tough if he's having to, be running over from defense as, doing that work in practice right over to field goal holding. That could be a little difficult logistically.
Well, we've heard that I heard from somebody that Torrey was probably the best one so far, the best holder so far. But
that kind of seemed to be what I was thinking was going to be the most likely.
Yeah.
So, and I believe if I'm remembering correctly, he was the number 2 on the 2 deep at holder last year, I believe, behind Gersande, who, had that art down. So
before him, that was Colton Rastetter was the guy at that position. So anyway, we've done enough holder talk.
Yes. So
a couple other guys besides Wampa, I'm excited to see TJ Hall. I've heard some really good things about him and his potential. Young guy, true freshman enrolled.
Everyone seems to be really high on him.
Yeah, he's there's some Desmond King whispers about him. So we'll see. Phil will probably yell at me for mentioning that if he listens to this, because he'll find me on Saturday and yell at me, him or Seth, one of the two. Don't put that on him. But I've heard he's really good. So we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And then I think maybe one of the most interesting people to see is going to be Logan Jones. So it sounds like he's taking some first team snaps at center after last year playing defense. That's a pretty quick move over to positions. And, as I was saying to George Barnett at today's press conference, he had somebody who's fairly good at that last time.
Yeah.
Or at center this year that, made that same switch from defense to offense. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. And it's going to be fascinating to see how that center position plays out and to see how that offensive line comes together. He seemed pretty positive about how things were going and felt pretty good about where things were moving. But boy, that's just, I thought it was interesting that now Colby's getting a little bit of a look outside. I thought would have happened already. And then when we talked to him, it hadn't. But now they're kind of kicking him out to tackle a little bit, see what that looks like. They're always the best 5, though. So best 5 will start. And it'll be interesting to see what that first 5 looks like. But it sounds like that center position, it's like a revolving door. One day it might be Ellsbury, one day it might be Fagan, the other day it might be Logan Jones being first team guy. So
and that's all with Myslinski out right now in the spring.
Myslinski's still out until June. So he'll get back in that race in August. And can he, or in June, I should say, when he comes back, when he's cleared, but he'll be full in August competing for that starting job. So could he, come from behind and get that job? And, does that mean Ellsbury gets a look at guard? I don't know.
Yeah, because obviously you want to find a spot for him at some point.
Maybe,
And then at guard,
Or Logan Jones, or Bo Stevens got mentioned today. I know they're pretty high on him. David Koff, we haven't even talked about him yet. I mean, there's some possibilities. Boy, he
and
was
you
raving
still
about
have
me.
like
He was
Justin
raving
Britt
about
still.
me. Yeah, he was raving about, Justin Britt too has been dinged up, but he was raving about Mason Richmond today.
Yeah, that was like really high on him. And I think maybe Mason got a bit of a bad rap last year because he's kind of thrown into a tough position.
Sure. Yeah.
And I love maybe my favorite part was Barnett's thing about if you're a fan of a microwave, you shouldn't be an offensive line coach.
Yes.
And
awesome.
you have to be more of a conventional oven kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I knew that was my lead for today's article as we record this on Wednesday. I knew it. I was like, okay, that's it. But I think, there's a lot of truth to that. And, Mason Richmond, as weird as this says to use this analogy in a sentence form, but he's been in that oven now for another year. So, it seems like I'm talking about like a Panera as opposed to Big Ten offensive line.
It takes time to develop. And I know we all want kind of instant gratification with this stuff, but that's not how this works. And I'd say relatively young group, an inexperienced group. So, if you look at it right now, the returning guys, Jack Plum might have the most snaps, but Connor Colby might be the other one, and he's a true sophomore.
Yeah, because he started 11 games.
Yeah.
I don't think, let's see, maybe Richmond might, but he's hurt. He
missed time.
So I don't think so. Yeah, I think Connor Colby might be, somebody will point this out to me.
Second most career snaps on the offensive line might be Connor Colby, who's a true sophomore.
You don't hear that every day.
No. So, I mean, on one hand, that's concerning, but on the other hand, it's like, oh boy, so you got a lot of guys who are, you're not married to guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To a starting group.
And theoretically, you have them around long term.
Sure.
Where theoretically, you get a couple more years of people like Colby or like Richmond. Obviously, you don't want to put that in Sharpie, because look at what happened with Cody Ince. You never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Or you could have the opposite of look at what happened when Linderbaum proved himself clearly as the top center in college football. He can make some good money now in the NFL. So you aren't necessarily going to keep everybody forever, but I think people wouldn't mind if the problem is they have too many offensive linemen being good enough to go to the NFL early.
Yeah, no one will complain about that. So I think they'll be okay. So,
and fingers crossed for good weather. Let's see, I'm throwing my meteorology hat on here. So, it looks like maybe a high of 71 right now, unless my current location thing is off. Let's see. No, 77. It's going to be the high on Saturday, it looks like. So could maybe get some nice weather.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to, assuming that everything doesn't blow around too much with the wind, getting to enjoy some outdoor football watching. So that'll
be nice. If it, we haven't had many of those 70-degree days this spring, have we?
No, I was running into the football facility today because I didn't think to bring a rain jacket. So I wouldn't mind that. So, and obviously getting some good football will be nice, having some new material to look at since the Citrus Bowl. The Citrus Bowl was a long time ago.
Yeah. So this is a good weekend, and then we kind of go back into, we evaluate everything, and then we'll go into hibernation a little bit, I guess, until July when then media day will be, we'll have probably a couple of media things during the summer or summer months, and touch base with Kirk and everything. But other than that, then the next big moment will be Big Ten Media Days,
and that's not till July.
Hopefully back in Chicago. Fingers crossed on that. Nothing against Indy, but Chicago is Chicago.
Yeah, a little bit of a shorter drive,
Yeah.
So, but I enjoyed Indy I was there for the combine and then the Big Ten women's tournament, and it was a wonderful city. So my hotel room overlooked Lucas Oil Stadium. So, got some good restaurants in, also got Giordano's in. So there may be a split vote among the audience of whether that should be in the good restaurant category or not. But,
there you go. There you go.
Well, Tom, thanks again for joining me.
John, thank you for having me on. I always enjoy conversing with you, and I'll see you Saturday.
Yes, pleasure is all mine. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into another episode of Hawk Off the Press. I'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, we will talk Hawks later.